When I was in an area with a lot of wealthy outdoors enthusiasts, such as Jackson, Wyoming, I'd scrounge at the local thrift shops in search of apparel that had been cast off by those who were more fortunate than I was. Killed my first 2 elk while wearing a faded and torn camouflage shirt that I bought used and then refurbished with a needle and thread and recolored it with a packet of RIT clothing dye.
I don't know about you, but I always carry a knife. It doesn't matter what the situation is, I'm always reaching for a blade. Whether I'm out hunting in the backwoods, fishing on lakes and rivers, or simply cutting rope at camp, and when I need a tool, I want something that's quality, durable, and handmade right here in the USA. I know that's something you're looking for as well, so go to maloneknives.com and get yourself something that's going to last and look damn good too. This is the Aptitude Outdoors podcast, where we interview travelers, explorers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the best tips and stories from around the world.
So I had a very long drive last week. I drove to Syracuse, New York, and back to do some video work for a friend. And I had a lot of time to think about stuff. And so I'm going to rock a solo episode today. I know those are pretty rare, but I've been, thinking about hunting and, how today in our modern age, everything is driven by just buying as much shit as humanly possible. I'm no minimalist or anything of the sort. I have tons of outdoors stuff. I've been doing outdoors stuff for a long time, but I read this it's more like a chapter introduction in a book that, Steven Rinella put out a few years ago. And I was listening to the audiobook of his Meat Eater book on the way home, which blah, blah, blah. Everybody's probably read all that stuff. But I think this quote has kind of defined my thought process on hunting. And to set it up, I'm more of what I would call, and we talked about this in the last episode when I was talking to Pat, is I'm a generalist. I don't specifically claim to be a bow hunter. I'm not a gun hunter. I just enjoy the art and the sport of hunting. And, go listen to any episode. You'll hear me talk about this in detail for hours with people. So I don't need to dive into that too extreme. But the whole point is it's, in my mind, it's a little counterproductive to me to always have to get the newest, most high-end gear, which I would argue absolutely none of my gear is. I'm more of a functional person, and I know social media is not true to real life. There's guys, and I talk about this with my buddy James from the 46 podcast all the time. There's a lot of dudes out there and women that you will never hear of, that you've never heard of. They're not on social media, and they're out there probably in blue jeans, just the best hunter you've never heard of, or in the stuff they've been rocking since 1994. And I keep seeing this stuff because obviously I'm just down the rabbit hole of social media. I work in social media. I'm a creative person. I'm always posting on social media, but as I've stated in the past too, I try and not look at it too often because it's soul sucking. So I'm trying to educate myself instead of scrolling through social media, but I'll ramble on here. I want to read this introduction chapter and I think this shaped my philosophy on gear a long time ago. And I'll talk about that a little bit after I read it. So I'll just get into it. I grew up hunting in used apparel, from my dad's old wool army surplus clothes to homemade camo stitched together by my mother, and then handed down to me once my brothers outgrew them. Even after I moved away from home, I still sourced my hunting apparel from places such as Goodwill. When I was in an area with a lot of wealthy outdoors enthusiasts, such as Jackson, Wyoming, I'd scrounge at the local thrift shops in search of apparel that had been cast off by those who were more fortunate than I was. Killed my first 2 elk while wearing a faded and torn camouflage shirt that I bought used and then refurbished with a needle and thread and recolored it with a packet of RIT clothing dye. The blaze orange hunting vest that I'm using now at 40 years of age came to me 17 years ago as a pre-owned garment. This isn't to say that used clothes are somehow better than new clothes. Rather, I'm suggesting that resourcefulness is more important than money when it comes to hunting apparel, something that I certainly wouldn't say about optics. Once you understand what materials to wear and how to layer them, you'll find that you can get properly attired on just about any budget. And, we're in this age where anyone can make anything. Like, people are starting businesses, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's just like 10 trillion options for very expensive hunting clothes. I don't own any of them. I have what's readily available. My first deer I killed with stuff I bought at Walmart. Was it comfortable? No. Was it effective? It was effective enough. And someone like me who's a generalist, I hunt anything. I hunt squirrel, duck, deer. I go fishing. None of my equipment is high end. And it's one of those things that's just like a continuous cycle of everybody's always, it's like an arms race to see who can have the most fancy, expensive equipment. And to me, it just defeats the purpose, because I just want to be outside hunting, and I want to be as effective and as comfortable as I can while doing that. And, I don't have generally matching camo. I just have camo that I've acquired over the years. It's all been a learning process. And, I'm at the point where I don't need any more freaking camo. I mean, one set for every season is pretty much essentially enough for me. And I've traveled all over the country. I've hunted in Texas and stuff, and I've fished in the ocean. I've been all over the place, and it's all the same. Like, it's all the same stuff. You can say I need this pattern to match this, whatever, and it's going to camouflage you better. Yeah, it's probably true. But everyone I've hunted with also who are much more skilled than me, I've never claimed to be great at it, literally is wearing like mismatched camo. Their pants are green for fall or early spring or something, and their shirts are all like fall camo with dark brown oak leaves and stuff. So it's just like, I don't know, they're killing just as many animals as anyone I've ever seen on television or anything. So I just kind of have this ethic, I guess, where it's like outside the scope of social media. And it's just like, I don't know, I think the gear that matters to me for hunting and fishing and stuff is the gear that works. I mean, is it better to have a rifle that's, a little more expensive, that's going to shoot more accurately, that's machined a little better? Absolutely. Same with like a bow. Is it better to have a bow that's, more high end, that's going to, possibly shoot more accurately? It could be, yes. But at the end of the day, are you practicing? Can you kill an animal at 20, 30, 40 yards accurately? I mean, essentially that's 99% of the kills happening with a bow, or probably very close range. So I think if that's a specific thing that you're into, it's like, whatever, that's fine. There's people who only hunt archery. They don't touch a gun. It is what it is. That's fine. If that's your thing, totally, whatever, go for it. But I think it's just like, I don't know. It just always feels like it's an arms race to who can buy the most expensive shit that exists. I've killed a few deer. I've used equipment that has been handed down. I bought a bow that was in my price range, and it works. It shoots accurately. I can shoot accurately up to like 30 yards. It's totally fine. So I guess I just like wanted to kind of touch base to where this ethic came from. And, there's some things that you can't skimp on. Like, if you're trying to track an animal that's 2 miles away, you can't just skimp on like cheap glassware. I get it. Like, it totally makes sense. But I would say a lot of the hunters out there aren't doing that where I'm from in the Midwest. It's mostly just, you have access to some property, you have access to limited public land up here in Northwest Ohio where I'm at, or down south, there's a lot more public land, but it's all mostly in the woods or the edge of a cornfield, reading deer signs, stuff like that. And I don't know, it's just so strange. I've gone out perch fishing with my buddy and his uncle, and they're out there in like jeans and like a flannel that looked 45 years old. And it's like, they don't have these insanely high end like fishing garments and stuff, and they're limiting out. Like, it's so strange to me to watch this unfold, because I grew up very cheap, and that's just stuck with me. I recently started. I really enjoy duck hunting, and everybody says hunting is expensive, and it can be if you make it. But like, the thought of looking at decoys at Cabela's and Bass Pro, I've been checking them out. I mean, we're talking $150 for a handful of decoys. You can get some cheaper ones. Like, I think there's like flambeau decoys that are, $70, $75, $80 for a 12 pack. And it's just like, I don't know. I think the line that stuck most with me from this quote I read from was this Hunting, Butchering, and Cooking Wild Game, Volume 1, Big Game. Everybody probably has that book at home if they hunt. And it really stuck with me, the resourcefulness. Like I went, instead of just buying them outright, because I don't, I'm not like very well off or anything. I just like work an average job, make average money. And so like I can't just buy thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of hunting stuff every year, which I just refuse to be in that much debt. I just don't think it's, for me, it doesn't make any sense. I don't want to be buried in credit card debt and stuff like that. So I went on Amazon and I found some decoys, terrible shape, all the paint's chipped off. But like, that's how I grew up. You fix things, you make things. And like, I'm not a painter. I've never painted a day in my life past like high school art class. So it's like, I just kind of figured it out and I'm restoring these decoys, and I bought 20 decoys for $40. Yes, they're not in great shape. There's basically no color left. And I'm just figuring it out. I bought some spray paint. I probably spent another $60 in paint and stuff. So for roughly 100 and some change, I'm out the door with 20 decoys that are going to be fairly usable. And it's just stuff like that that makes me think. Like I saw recently, I really, really like the thought of saddle hunting. I do not like sitting in a ladder stand. They're very uncomfortable. They're very loud. And I've talked to enough people that hunt out of a saddle that I was like, I think this is what I want to do. But they're like extremely cost prohibitive. Like they're expensive. Like $300, $400 for essentially a harness that you sit in. And it's easier to buy something like that outright and just have it and be done and don't have to think about it anymore. But like, I don't only deer hunt. So like, if I was just a deer hunter and I was just bow hunting and that was my whole thing, I would buy that. But I'm not. So I watch a ton of YouTube videos and I have stuff laying around, all the safety equipment minus essentially the harness. I have climbing carabiners. I have, weight bearing carabiners. I have all this stuff I've had for years from backpacking and just all the stuff that I do. And I built my own saddle, and it probably cost me like $150. But I'm talking like the total cost. Like I didn't have climbing sticks. I've never used climbing sticks before. I bought some climbing sticks at Fin Feather Fur for I think like $70. And then I bought a linesman's harness on Amazon for maybe $35. And then I basically had all the ropes I needed from the climbing safety harness stuff that I've had laying around, all the carabiners. And then I bought a sit drag to basically build my own saddle. The only thing that cost the most, which you're not going to get away with, was the platform for the saddle setup. But even then, we're talking like $170 to $200 for the platform, the safety harness, what are those called? I just said it. The climbing sticks. So I essentially built my own for what it costs to just buy a saddle and ropes. Which to me, like it's in my mind, like if you have the money, great, go for it. I don't have the money. So that's what I'm getting at. And it's just like, there's so much to be said for being resourceful, because I now have a saddle set up. I love it. It's so comfortable. I've sat in the tree for 4.5 hours and I did not, like, my legs didn't go numb. My feet didn't go numb. It was totally an enjoyable experience. And that's kind of like the whole ethic behind everything I do, is like, I can't afford everything.
I was asked recently, what does the outdoors mean to you? To me, the outdoors is everything. It's like the growth model that consumes the entrepreneur, or the unending drive that pushes the athlete to outperform the competition. It's the greatest teacher of life lessons, whether it be learning to accept that most things are out of your control, or that the trees, the rivers, the mountains move along whether you're there or not. It's the motivator that keeps me accountable to my physical and mental health, because if I don't have the strength and conditioning to do the things that I enjoy outdoors, whether they be hunting, fishing, backpacking, adventure racing, or tackling some long distance adventures, then everything becomes exponentially more difficult. Most importantly, the outdoors allows me to be, to think, to exist in the same plane that the majority of the natural world still exists in. To break the bonds from what we call civilization. The outdoors is freedom, a place where life and death are one and the same. The prime example of what it means to exist. In my mind, there's no separation. The outdoors simply is, as all things should be, perfection in its most chaotic form. The outdoors is you, it's me, it's all of us.
With duck hunting comes goose hunting. Goose hunting those decoys are insanely expensive. I'm not buying goose decoys unless I really get into it. But I had to get a ground blind, a solo ground blind, and they make some that are $400 or $500. I got one that was $120 because I don't goose hunt daily. I want to have the option to go goose hunting in a field with my friend if I have the option. So I'm not saying gear is bad. I have a ton of gear, but it's I try and be reasonable about my gear choices. There's things that I will not skimp on. I've learned the hard way, really shitty circulation in my feet and hands, and they're always freezing. More so, I hunt with guys that don't wear gloves and they're completely fine, and I'm my hands feel they're gonna snap off my body. So I bought very, very, very insulated hunting boots that were probably $250. But that was worth it to me. That's a thing that I use all the time now when I'm hunting or anything that needs to be in cold weather, I'm wearing those. That's a great expenditure. For my hunting clothes, I probably have Cabela's baseline cold weather hunting gear. Probably paid $200 for everything, for the bibs and the jacket and all that stuff. And I'm not cold. That's you can buy a $400 jacket that's very lightweight and it's going to keep you just as warm, but you're buying a $400 jacket, which, whatever. If you can afford that stuff, it's great. Again, I don't think the average hunter has that kind of fundage. A lot of us are out just doing it because we enjoy it. And the point I'm getting at is I've met some really badass hunters and none of them are gearheads, essentially. They'll do whatever they can to go out and hunt. And that's, buying that. Some people hunt out of a $30 ladder stand or a $50 ladder stand that they buy at Walmart, and they're just slaying more deer than anybody that you've ever seen online. And it's just the whole point of this is you don't have to have that to be successful. I mean, it's so much more important, again, from my perspective, whatever, disagree with me, to understand the animals themselves. I've said that a million times on this podcast. It's just so much more relevant to have an understanding of the animals because my whole perspective is historical. I have an anthropology degree, blah, blah, blah. I've said this a million times also. And I always kind of think back for a long time ago. There was more animals, obviously, so we didn't need as much, camo and all this tricky bullshit that we use now to try and conceal ourselves. But thousands of years ago, and even some modern tribes, they're wearing nothing. They're running around with a bow. They're using old methods that have been effective for thousands and thousands, if not millions of years, chasing down animals on the plains, tiring them out, and they're killing them that way, or they're using traditional bows, and it's just we've built this consumer society and everybody's a lot more comfortable. Everybody has the choice to, not hunt. And so it's a privilege to be able to hunt. But I think it's kind of becoming just part of a consumer cycle of it's just another arm of consumerism, just buy as much shit as you can. Buying stuff is going to make you better, which we all know inherently is not true. You can't just buy a better paintbrush and then you're a better artist. You know what I mean? You have to have a baseline of understanding art before you can become a better artist. And that's I don't know. It just feels it's always going backwards. Everything's so focused on looking a certain way, buying a certain piece of gear. And I see this online because I'm always looking for resources to help me become better because I'm not the most successful hunter. I've spent, I would say, over 40 hours already deer hunting, and I've not shot a deer. And I've gone to different places. I've hunted, family property. I've had close encounters. It's just a difficult thing, and I'm still relatively new at it. I mean, 5 years, 6 years might sound like a long time, but it's really not. The opportunity, the amount of deer I've seen in those 5 or 6 years is pretty limited, and I don't have that like continuous contact, and to be able to like understand what to do in every situation. And it's such a fluid thing. Like, deer are not going to do the same thing. They'll be there one day, not the next. They might come one way one day and go out another way, and it's just like learning that. Even if I don't get the option to shoot something or bring home food, I'm still learning out there, and it gets frustrating. I have to remind myself all the time. But to me, that's the exciting part. The clothes is like a hindrance. I hate having to think about that stuff. Like, for me, I don't want to have to pick out shit. I want to be able to just like walk into the room, put on the stuff that I have, and go. Like, it's a burden for me to just have to like can think about gear. It's like, I don't want anything to do with it. I want like a hand warmer, warm clothes, and my bow. And I don't have to think about anything and think, oh, did I leave this? And then, it's kind of like when people go to the gym and they rely on supplements, and they're always like, oh yeah, I forgot my subs. This workout's going to suck. Like, you don't need any of that shit. You just need to go work out. It's like the same thing. And it's like, I'm not talking shit about anyone or anything. Like, obviously I'm not a fucking hunting legend. I'm just a dude that really loves this shit, and I care about, the whole thing, conservation, environmental shit, the wildlife themselves, the food, the whole culture of it, to me, is what I enjoy, and meeting these awesome people. That's why I do it. And, it's become more than just a hobby. Like, I was very into backpacking for a long time, and that's kind of where I started this gear thought before I even read this book. Like, how many people, when I was through hiking the Appalachian Trails, it's like all they talked about was fucking gear. And I just did not care. I wanted to be outside. And like, these people would literally like shame you, like, oh, your backpack weighs 2 pounds. Mine weighs 8 ounces. And like, I'd never fucking see these guys again. They never, God knows if they even finish the trail, because they're so consumed with like, oh, well, my 8.02 ounce thing broke and I have to get a new one. I have to wait in town for 6 weeks for him to like, what are you doing? Like, it drives me nuts. And that's kind of where this ethic, it's stayed with me all this time. Like, I'm not saying don't get nice things. If you're into it and you can afford it, go ahead. But like, I just think it's so useless to worry about it. And like even the guys on the Hunting Public, I love watching that show because they're just running around like torn up raggedy shit, and they're always killing deer, and it's so awesome. And I think it's just so cool. Like, obviously, gear that revolves around safety, you're going to want to really make sure that it's good quality stuff. Like, the carabiners I have for my safety equipment aren't just like off-brand shit. Like, they have they're like the Black Diamond ones. They're made for climbing. They're rated for weight, excessive amounts of weight. They have an international rating for weight-bearing stuff. I don't remember what it's called for climbing. Like, all of my climbing stuff is rated. Even the cheap, like $40, $35 harness I have has a rating from the specific rating, whatever organization that rates this stuff. Like, they have a certificate. It's actually rated, so like, it doesn't worry me. So like, that safety, don't skimp on. But like, I don't know. I get so annoyed seeing an ad for clothing all the damn time. And it's like, if you can afford First Light, dude, that's sweet. That's great stuff. I'm sure it's like 1/10 of the weight and twice the warmth. But like, I don't know. I feel like it leads people to being like, you need this rather than it's a luxury. Like, it's like the difference between buying like a brand new Escalade versus like I don't know, what is it, the GMC or whatever version, or fucking whatever. I don't know much about cars, but like, they're the same car. One's just like the luxury edition. Like, you don't need it. Do you want it? Yeah, absolutely. Everybody wants that. It would be, if I had unlimited money, I would totally have that, but I don't. And most of us don't. There's not that many rich people out there. So it's like, I think the whole point that I'm trying to reiterate here is, if you like something, You don't have to let social media tell you that you need to have fancy shit. That's it. That for the whole 20 minutes I've been talking, that's the point I'm getting to, is like, you don't have to wait until you have the nice gear to go hunt or fish or whatever. I still have cheap fishing rods. I have like one or two that are really nice, but like I have caught a lot of fish and I like to fish. And some of the best fishermen I know that limit out on walleye and perch every time they go out on Lake Erie, the rods that they have, I was literally asking, I'm like, oh, is this like a specific perch rod? And he said, I don't know. He says, I just use it. And I'm like, that's such a great mindset. And he always is catching these fish, always. Like I've never seen these guys come back without limits because they've been doing it for 20, 30 years. And it's like, to me, that's always my takeaway. Just go out and do it. And eventually, over time, you'll know what gear you really need and want and will actually assist you, and then what doesn't matter. I've caught some of the biggest fish I've ever caught out of a kayak or a rowboat. I don't have to be out 50 miles into the ocean. It's just, if you enjoy it, don't let shit get in the way. Don't let social media ruin it for you, because a lot of these people are just selling you stuff, and that's fine. Yeah, everybody makes a living. Like, some of these companies do awesome things. They aid in a lot of conservation, which is awesome. So like, there's no shit talking about brands or whatever. It's just not something I personally care about. So like, yeah, let me know if you relate to this, because I feel like I see more often than not, it's just brands. But like, the real people that I know that aren't just like talking heads on social media aren't that way. So yeah, go over to my Instagram. That's where I'm most active. If you feel the same way, let me know. Shoot me a comment. I'd like to have that conversation with you, because it just kind of feels like you get lost in the sauce and it's just constantly like people talking about gear, and it's just getting tired of it. So I wanted to put out this episode. And as always, I would like to encourage all of you to get involved, again, with conservation. There's totally a million different organizations out there you can get involved with, whatever you're most interested in, species wise, whatever. There's an organization for that. Get involved. It's a great way to meet people. I've met tons of people through that. And also, if you know anybody that would be cool to talk to on the podcast, send them my way. Really looking for more conservation-minded people out there to continue that conservation message, and to kind of like get more output out there about why conservation is so important, not just kill them and grill them, which, also nothing wrong with that. That's just part of hunting. But again, thank you guys for listening and watching this episode. I will be back next week with another episode. And if you could, head over to the YouTube channel, subscribe if you can. If you're already here on YouTube, thank you. Grown quite a bit in the last few months, surprisingly. So I appreciate everybody that's new.